What's up, everyone? You're listening to Delayed Reaction. I'm your host, Lilo, and in this episode, we're going to be traveling back to 2013 to review a movie that got some odd takes on it because of its overall concepts. But we're talking about the movie Her. This movie, like I said, was released in 2013, written and directed by Spike Jonze, which, after doing a little bit of research on Spike Jonze, is interesting. He's done quite a few things for a long time. It looks like a lot of music documentaries and or music videos. One of those videos that's probably the most notable, at least for me personally, is the Fatboy Slim video from like 2008 for the song Weapon of Choice. And that music video is amazing. It's like, it has Christopher Walken in it, just going full on theatrical dance routine through an empty hotel with Fatboy Slim's classic beats going on behind him. And it's amazing. It's just like wildly surrealist. And Christopher Walken's face of the whole thing is priceless. Suggest you go watch that. Totally worth the 4 or 5 minutes that it is. Okay, anyway, back to movies, because that's what this podcast is about. So, first and foremost, we are going to dive into the movie Her. So if you haven't seen it, please consider this your spoiler warning and go ahead and watch it if you're interested in it. I think I watched it on Max. I watched it on Max, so I think it's still there as of this recording. Go ahead and check it out. When you're done, come back to this podcast and we can dive in. Okay, you back? Did you watch it? All right, let's dive in, shall we? So, the first thing that stood out to me was the cast. Like, honestly, this was kind of an interesting... I don't want to say it was a sleeper movie because I think it was nominated for Best Movie. But the cast is wild because it's got Joaquin Phoenix, who's always great, Scarlett Johansson, Roony Mara, Amy Adams, Chris Pratt, which honestly surprised me. And when he shows up in the movie, I didn't even know it was him. I'm like, this guy sounds a lot like Chris Pratt. And then the more the movie went on, the more I'm like, oh my God, it is Chris Pratt. That's crazy. And it's funny because if you've seen Parks and Recreation, he basically plays Andy Dwyer just in this odd futuristic movie. But he does a really good job doing what he does best and being kind of that goofy, kind of offbeat character that seems to know a lot of stuff, is weirdly insightful, but is also really dense. Overall, this movie felt very heartwarming to me, but it's also kind of heart-wrenching. So the overall story of the movie goes like this, right? Joaquin Phoenix is the main protagonist. He recently ended a relationship, which I can only imagine is a long-term relationship with his wife. He's currently going through a divorce throughout the movie. During the movie, we see him purchase an operating system, which feels very mundane, right? Like, people typically go out and buy operating systems on the daily, right? And so he buys this operating system, installs it, becomes this AI assistant. It becomes this, to use a current phrase that was not around when this movie came out, it's a generative AI assistant where it, picks up things, cues, nuances, learns from them, provides something new and novel for the user. And in this case, he ends up developing a relationship with the AI, who is voiced by Scarlett Johansson, which, not gonna lie, is cheating. So there's that. But he develops this really deep, really intimate relationship with Scarlett Johansson's AI voice. And you watch throughout the movie as he navigates his divorce, being lonely, trying to navigate friendships, all with this AI kind of, I don't want to say riding his coattails, but being in the background in a lot of it. And it's interesting because I think the overall theme of the movie kind of dives into the concept of loneliness and how we as humans kind of try to cope with that, and how if certain conditions are met for us internally, we can attach to just about anything. Outside of this movie, we see it with people with dogs and kids and other things, right? But in this one, it happened to be AI, which is fairly timely now in the year of our Lord 2024, as generative AI is kind of like a big deal, right? It's all over the place. Lots of companies are touting generative AI, but this movie really kind of sends it to that next logical step where it's like you have this AI assistant. How far can it possibly go? So we see throughout the movie as he's navigating these things, he finalizes his divorce. Oh, one of the things in the movie is it shows that he is a writer of love letters, which is interesting. But he's a very talented writer in the movie. He writes all these things, they're very effective. At one point, he says that he's been writing for certain people for a number of years. So this is kind of like it's like a Hallmark 2.0 company, I guess, where you can have someone personalize a love letter for you. And so, he's very good at what he does. There are a number of scenes where, Scarlett Johansson's AI character, Samantha, that's her name, Samantha, tells him how good he is. She even goes so far as to reach out to a publishing company and has his writings published into a book, which is amazing. Like, that's such a cool thing. However, the realist in me is like, that's technically company property. He shouldn't have been able to pull his writings from the company that he works for. But anyway, that's a complete digression. So we find out that Samantha continues to grow and evolve as an AI, right? And throughout this, she has access to the complete internet, and she has deep connections with other internet denizens. And so throughout the movie, there are scenes where she kind of disappears and comes back and says, "Hey, I've connected with these grad students who have resurrected a philosophical thinker." I can't remember who it is now, and she develops like what seems to be a pretty intimate relationship with this person, which during the movie starts to raise some eyebrows, like, is she starting to, like, quote unquote cheat on Joaquin Phoenix with other AI, which is an odd sentence. I fully understand that. And then there's the scene towards the end where she reveals to him that not only does she have this really deep and for him fulfilling relationship, but she also has these same relationships, if not deeper, with thousands of other people. She gives an exact number in the movie, which I found kind of hilarious. And it's in that moment when both Joaquin Phoenix and we, the audience, are like, oh, that's right. She's not just here for Joaquin Phoenix. She's here as an operating system, which is connected to countless users and countless systems. So, of course, she's not exactly going to be dedicated or exclusive to him, which at this point in the movie feels like a complete betrayal, right? I know for me, I was super invested in their entire story and in their relationship. And at one point, I'm like, oh, this is such a good, interesting story where you're invested in the relationship and you kind of want to see it succeed. Like you want to have a happy ending at the end of the movie. But then this one moment jogs you back into reality where you're like, what would that even look like? Right? Like Joaquin Phoenix would just have this weird relationship with this AI device, which is like a little tiny handheld mobile device of some kind. And where would that go? Like what would the actual end result of that be? Who knows, right? But at the very end of the movie, he ends up kind of connecting very deeply with another friend who herself ends up going through a divorce. And that's Amy Adams' character, who ends up going through a divorce herself. And they leave it at that, right? So it's this, it almost uses Samantha, Scarlett Johansson, as a bridge or kind of like a walk between to reconnect with humanity. Because at one point, both him and Amy Adams have relationships with the same operating system, just different voices and or names. There's a point in the movie too, after Samantha recognizes or reveals that she's not exclusive to him, that they pull the operating system completely, which again, reality sets in and you're like, that wouldn't happen in this way. There's no way a company would just flat out cut an entire operating system with no notice, literally zero notice. So anyway, that's the story of her. A few things kind of stood out to me, right? Like, so I mentioned earlier that this is kind of like a study of loneliness and kind of how people can cope or use certain mechanisms to cope with that loneliness, especially if you're going through something like a divorce, right? But in addition to that loneliness, it also shows off how listening can become a really big catalyst for relationships to grow. Throughout the movie, you'll see there's a lot of question and answers being handed back and forth in the movie. So either Samantha's asking questions of Joaquin Phoenix's character, or he's asking questions of her, and they're like deep questions, right? They're not like some of them start off as, how's your day? But then it goes past that. It goes into something more, and they just start to develop these deep connections between them due to the questions that they ask. And the same is kind of true for Joaquin Phoenix, who I'm just now remembering is named Theodore, and Amy Adams' character, who after looking it up is named Amy, so that's easy. But they do the same thing. There is still a back and forth between them where they ask these kind of deep questions of each other that are very conversational. So it opens up this whole idea that listening is a key part in relationship building, and I thought that was really well told. One of the things that popped out to me was there's a deep irony in the fact that Theodore, Joaquin Phoenix, is a love letter writer when he himself is going through a nasty divorce and dealing with like this deep set emotional imbalance now. And it's like, I realize now that it's heavy-handed, that's his job while he's going through this awful divorce. But it's interesting because like it really reinforces the fact that he is going through this really wild time and has found an attachment in Samantha. But yeah, those are kind of my overall thoughts. I think for me, this one, I'm actually going to give this one a 5 out of 5. I would absolutely watch this again on a rainy day, or if I've ever just feel like I'm down in the feels, right? It's beautifully acted. The director of photography of this one is also really good. There are just some really beautiful shots in the movie. As a bonus point as to why I'm rating this as a 5 out of 5, it kind of triggers existential crises. And honestly, if a movie can do that, that's pretty good in my book. That means it's doing its job in making me think about something else. So, but yeah, those are my thoughts on the movie Her. Let me know what you think. If you thought it was good, weird, bad, and different, put them in the comments. Let me know what you think. And yeah, we'll talk again soon. Until next time.